Hello, I am Mr. Laneous, reviewer of the Miscellaneous.
George!
Sorry, I seem to have gotten a little overexcited there. As you might have guessed from that freakout, I love Curious George. It makes sense. I love monkeys, and I've known George all my life. He's very special to me. And a large part of that was this video, The Adventures of Curious George. This is a stop-motion adaptation of two Curious George stories, the original and George Goes to the Hospital. And now, if I may indulge in some childhood nostalgia, let's take a look. The first segment, narrated by June Foray, opens with George living in Africa, where he is observed by the man with the yellow hat.
George was always very curious. And of course, he was curious about what was in the bushes. Uh-oh.
That's an African bull elephant. What a nice little monkey. I'd like to take him home with me.
Alright, now, I can't not discuss this. It's been debated whether the man kidnapped George, and I have to be honest, I see where they're coming from. I mean, in the movie, they meet in the jungle, George follows the man home without him knowing, and they have to bond over the next couple days, allowing for some character development. Here, he forcibly takes George from his home for unclear reasons. Was it just on a whim? He later says he's putting George in the zoo, so does he work for them? It's really unclear. Anyway, the man takes George onto a boat.
In the Navy, yes, you can sail the seven seas. In the Navy.
Where the young fellow was fascinated by some seagulls and their ability to fly.
Where's George? Where's George? Where's George? Man overboard! Monkey overboard! Here's the life preserver! Hang on, George!
Oh my god! That was dark! I mean, he nearly drowned! You know, maybe removing a wild animal from his natural habitat wasn't such a good idea.
Yeah? No? No! Yeah!
So the man takes George to his home where we get this scene.
George!
What the was that? I said fudge. So after that bit of trauma, George is amazed by the telephone and decides to give it a try. He inadvertently calls the fire department, where Fire Chief Frank Nelson here is unaware that it's only a curious monkey on the other end.
Anybody there?
Yes!
Thinking there really is a fire, they rush over to the house only to find George. Outraged, they manage to catch him and lock him up in prison. And now, ladies and gentlemen, one of the saddest things ever.
Come on down from there. Come on down from there.
With that bit of luck, George escapes and finds a man selling balloons right outside the prison wall. Yeah, because right outside of a prison is a great place to sell balloons to small children. George accidentally takes flight and flies over the city until he safely lands on top of a traffic light. I love that guy. Imagine if he had a cameo in Up. George and the man are reunited, the man pays for the balloons, and then he takes George to his new home at the zoo.
What a nice place for George to live.
And so ends the first story. We'll be right back after these messages. Oh right, we don't do that. Next story. The second story, narrated by not June Foray, opens with George waking up and— Wait a minute! They just put him in the zoo! How did he get back to living with the man? Oh, right, that book wasn't adapted.
Today, George was curious about the big box on the man's desk. It was full of funny little pieces of all sorts of shapes and all sorts of colors. It looked like a piece of candy. Maybe it was candy. Maybe he could eat it. Before he knew it— Ooh. A while later, the man with the yellow hat came home.
Why, George, I see you've already opened the box with the jigsaw puzzle. It was supposed to be a surprise for you.
That's why I left it out in the open. George and the man get to work on the Curious George puzzle, only to find that one piece is missing. The next day, George isn't feeling so hot.
He had a tummy ache and did not want to eat his breakfast.
The man calls Dr. Baker, who is unable to tell what the ailment is.
You'd better take George to the hospital and have an x-ray taken.
Don't worry, George. You've been here before when you broke your leg.
Whoa, 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 whoa! Time out, time out! He broke his leg? When did this happen? Oh, right, that book wasn't adapted. A doctor x-rays George, not at all questioning the fact that he's a freaking monkey, and they realized that George had eaten the puzzle piece.
George will have to stay at the hospital for a few days. They'll put a tube down his throat to get the piece out. It's only a small operation.
Look, Betsy. There's Curious George. Betsy had never been to a hospital before. She was scared.
George is admitted to the children's ward, where everyone seems to know him.
Dave was having a blood transfusion. Steve had his leg bandaged and was in a go-kart. Betsy was in bed, looking sad.
By the way, the sad girl whose ailment is never stated gets the most focus, the kid with the broken leg gets a little, and the kid getting a freaking blood transfusion is never mentioned again.
I have to leave now, George. I'll be back first thing in the morning before they take you to the operating room.
Oh, come on! We're just getting over the jail scene! The next morning, George is being prepped for the operation, which includes getting a shot.
It's going to hurt, George, but only for a moment. But the needle hasn't touched you yet.
Well, you did start trying to reassure him by saying outright that it would hurt. So the piece is removed off screen, and after George recovers, he visits the playroom, where he puts on a puppet show.
The children laughed and shouted. And even Betsy, for the first time, smiled a little.
Ah! She turned into the other mother!
You know I love you.
There were other things in the playroom. A TV set.
Okay, hold on. The puzzle, everybody knows him, the cartoon. When did George become so famous? Oh, right, that book wasn't adapted.
We have a big day ahead of us. The mayor is coming to visit the hospital today. And later on, you'll be going home, George.
When George woke up from his nap, Steve was just taking his first steps.
Hope it goes better than the kid from Rejected. Noticing that the go-kart is unoccupied, George decides to give it a go. The adults look over the damage when suddenly they hear laughter coming from above.
And there stood Betsy. Then the children joined in. And a couple of others. The mayor started laughing. And finally, everybody just laughed and laughed.
Well, it is nice to see everybody happy.
Everybody, that is, except George.
Really?
Don't be sad, George. The whole thing was so funny. I never laughed so much in my whole life.
Monkey caused mass destruction. George is praised for making Betsy happy as the man arrives and, without questioning the huge mess, takes George back home. But not before the nurse gives George a box to open once they get back. And what's in the mystery box? The puzzle piece! I may not be a scientific expert, but I doubt that a puzzle piece that just went through someone's digestive system would come out perfectly intact. Unless they just bought the same puzzle and gave him that one piece. But then that puzzle can't be finished. For when there are two puzzles sharing a piece, one can never be finished.
How nice of the doctor to save it for us.
And now we can finish the puzzle.
And that was the adventures of Curious George. What do I think? Thank you for watching. Hope to see you again in the mist.
Sure swallowed a lot of water.
No shit, Sherlock!